Hello, everybody. Thank you for coming again to Citizen Assembly Women. We will get started with some introductions, name, where you are or where you're from, and 2 words to describe yourself in this moment. I'll begin by saying, hi, my name is Lois Diggs. I am now in Norfolk, Virginia in the United States. 2 words to describe myself in this moment are joyful and eager. All right. So Kay, would you like to introduce yourself?
Definitely. Hi, everyone. My name is Kay, and I live in San Jose, California. And 2 words to describe me would be I'm feeling warm, have my heater going, and I am excited about today's topic.
Great. That sounds very comfortable and cozy. Thank you for being here, Kay. Megan, will you please introduce yourself?
Sure, I am Megan, and I am currently in San Antonio, Texas. And 2 words to describe me would be satisfied and interested in this discussion.
Very good. Thank you very much for being here. And Kat, will you please introduce yourself? Please unmute yourself. We can't hear you right now.
Kat Newman. I'm in Stockport near Manchester, United Kingdom. Describe myself in 2 words. I'm just enjoying the summer or the spring.
Good. That sounds really great. Kay has her heater going, but it sounds like things may be a little warmer where you are. But as long as you're both comfortable, I'm happy. So today's topic is on school uniforms. And so give me a moment, please, to share my idea in Agora. Let's just take a moment. Okay. So one thing that I wanted to point out here is that this idea is in the Community Matters part of Agora. With one of the most recent updates, there's been a main Agora, also municipal and community. And one of the communities within this community is a section called Education Reform. And so this is a place where ideas specifically pertaining to education can be collected and voted on and commented on, et cetera, et cetera. So to join this community, you just need to go to the Community Agora and then click Edit Communities. And then in that section, type in Education Reform. But anyway, let me open the idea here. Okay. The idea is to adapt uniforms in schools. If school uniforms are a violation of self-expression, why are they used so often among sports teams and employees? Among sports teams and employees, the benefits of uniforms are more important than individually expressing oneself. School is also a context in which the benefits of uniforms outweigh self-expression through personal dress. First, safety. It is easier to keep track of students on field trips. Intruders on school grounds are easily recognized, and the concealing of weapons under baggy clothing is prevented. Second, behavior improvements. It is no secret that the clothing one wears has an effect on one's state of mind. Wearing a school uniform instills in students values of humility, modesty, and decorum. Education experts have noted that a school uniform requirement encourages students to behave appropriately in the classroom. A peer-reviewed study on urban schools found that schools with uniform policies had 12% fewer firearm-related incidents and 15% fewer drug-related incidents than schools without uniforms. Secondary schools in Ohio's 8 largest school districts found that uniforms improve graduation, attendance, and suspension rates. 2 scholars with the National Bureau of Economic Research examined 160 public urban schools over a period of 13 years and found consistent improvement of attendance, behavior, and test scores in schools that adopted uniforms. After a couple of years, the number of suspensions were half their former rates. Researchers from Macquarie University found that in schools across the world where uniform policies are enforced, students are more disciplined and listen significantly better, with lower noise levels and lower teaching waiting times, with classes starting on time. Third, cost efficiency and time efficiency. There's less stress and hassle in deciding what to wear every day to school. Uniform policies are also easier to enforce than loose dress codes. So having a uniform to wear saves both schools and families time, energy, and money. The largest percentage of back-to-school shopping is clothing, and school uniforms are less expensive than trendy clothing students might want to wear, especially when clothing is bought secondhand from others in the community. Fourth, a sense of community, inclusion, team spirit, and school pride. In a study of over 1,000 Texas middle schools, students in school uniforms reported significantly more positive perceptions of belonging in school community. Students may express themselves in many ways, such as writing one's thoughts in an essay, telling one's heart through a speech, or speaking one's soul through a work of art. Therefore, comfortable uniforms that fit well on a variety of body types can be a useful addition to schools. And here's a list of references in the idea. So let's get a feel for how we feel about this idea right off the bat. You can raise your hand to support, and in a second you can raise your hand to express lack of support. But if you're unsure or if you're unsure or on the fence, or if you want more information or want to wait to discuss, you can choose to abstain from voting. So if you like this idea and if you want to support it, you can express it by raising your hand. 1, 2, 3. Okay. So if you read the idea, but you don't like it, you're not interested in supporting it, you can express that by raising your hand. 1. Okay, great. So now we're going to open this idea for discussion. So if you have a question or comment, you can just type hand up in the chat and we can get started. So does anyone have any questions or comments about this? Yes, Megan?
Sure, I will go ahead. So I love the way that you presented the idea, Lois. So thank you for your research and what you put into it. And I will say there actually are a couple of points in there that I can agree with and get behind. But overall, just the principle of it, I don't. But the mini thing. So I want to go over that. So the first one, actually, I do see the utility in the case of a field trip to have maybe the same shirt, because in that case, it is easy. So I can see that. However, that wouldn't have to be something every day. It could be if kids are going on a field trip, you just give them a special shirt for that. The other one I actually agree with is how just the benefit you pointed out that uniforms save time and money. And sometimes I know, especially among young women now, that the clothing trends are just very provoking, I guess I would say. And so it's kind of nice not to fall into those trends. So those are some benefits. But the issues, at least that I have with it, come with point number 2, that uniforms instill in students the desire to accept the social caste system. So classes are called that for a reason. It's designed to make people accept their social class, which is, no other place in the entire world besides nursing homes and schools are you grouped with only people of your same age. So it is designed to instill uniformity, because people who are more uniform are easier to control, which is why we see the studies that kids in uniforms do better on test scores and are more disciplined. It just means they're more indoctrinated and easier to control. And when we know the real mission behind why the school system, the current one, exists, it just contradicts it, because word for word, our school system is adopted from Prussia, and the public mission statement, one of them in Prussia, was to enslave the masses. Literally, it's there. So it's the same in our system. And then the last one, the inclusion. So that's another one. If you read a man named Alexander Ingalls, he was an educator, a really key one in the 1900s. There's a Harvard lecture hall named after him, and he wrote a book called The Principles of Secondary Education, and he has 6 different functions of the schools. And one of them, he talks about the inclusion factor, and basically it's of making everybody standardized and so-called equal. It's basically about dumbing everybody down to the same level and destroying individuality on all parts. And the way I look at it is that school uniforms fit into that. And I yield.
Thank you very much, Megan. I will go next. So, I hear what you're saying. However, you mentioned the origins of the public school system and the desire to control. School uniforms are much more common in private schools than in public schools. So I don't think that there's a big correlation with that. And also, I don't think that having a standardized dress is a form of indoctrination, or like in of enforcing or like putting ideas into someone. People respond to a uniform in different ways. Some people, when they have a uniform, they feel important. They feel like sort of official or something like that. For example, sometimes in some workplaces, when people receive a uniform or like their a tie or a jacket or a hat or something like that, it makes them feel good and important and official. I know I need to wear a uniform to work, and it makes me feel good. It doesn't make me feel like my will is being violated or my individuality is suffering, anything like that. I think it makes a statement about what I do and why I'm here, and my work in the time that I'm wearing this uniform. And then also your point about uniformity in the same age. So there is an age range in schools. It's not just by grade. It's like you have elementary and then middle and secondary, as you know, obviously. So there, and especially when children are younger, age differences are more distinct. So 6-year-olds are pretty different from 12-year-olds, for example, even though they wear the same, they might wear the same kind of thing. And then also this issue, finally, this issue about control. I think control is not always a bad thing. For example, I have experience in teaching classical ballet at a homeschool co-op. And I remember sometimes the students would get a little out of control, and it would be up to me as the teacher to bring everybody, to center everyone and bring them back to focus on where we needed to focus, on where we needed to learn. So control can be a bad thing if it's for nefarious ends, but sometimes it is needed and sometimes it is useful. And it's not, the way I see it, it's not a sin against the students to control them in some ways, but it can be necessary sometimes. And I think uniforms is a very benign way of doing that kind of thing. So I yield the floor, and it looks like Megan has her hand up. Megan?
Yes, so I appreciate that response. Really, actually good points that you brought up. So about private schools, so Kathleen said where she is in the UK that public schools have uniforms too, and some do here too. It actually just depends, but the private schools are just as much, or they serve just as much to indoctrinate as the public schools, but it's for a reason. So in The Country School Tomorrow by Frederick Taylor Gates, who was one of the founders of the modern school system with Rockefeller, talks about how their goal was to so if you read the end of their public mission statement, after they say we don't need teachers, lawyers, doctors, preachers, politicians, all of that, I think I've read that before. At the end, they said because we have an ample supply. So they have certain elite private schools, some private boarding schools, where students enter who are then trained to be the next generation of leaders, but they're just as much sheep, so to say, as the masses, just in a different way. Because the idea is that I agree, control isn't always a negative thing. It has its utility, but control that comes from outside of ourselves or our family or community, that's when it becomes detrimental. Because in just the whole institution of school in general is where control is placed in some centralized authority that the students will never meet. And so they learn basically overall, even uniforms teach them subconsciously that their lives are insignificant because all of their activities, their uniform, the ringing of the bells, the teachers telling them what to do, who receive information from strangers higher up from them, it all teaches students that they're insignificant and not important. And yeah, but and also I believe it promotes socialism too, which is just very similar to communism as well, in that I don't believe all people are equal. I think that people have everybody has the same potential, but not everybody uses it. And if somebody doesn't use their potential, they shouldn't get all the things for somebody that does. So yeah, but I'm not, once again, I believe all people are worthy and anybody can have anything they want to, no matter what gender, what their sexual orientation is, any of that, or race, and none of that affects them. The only thing that affects them is the belief they have about their self. And that's what's important, is to have a strong foundation of personal belief in yourself. And, how can you have that if you are told just by dress code that you're the same as everybody else? So, and the last thing too is I'm not against the idea of a dress code though. So I look at the Amish, for example, they don't have set uniforms, but they have a general dress code. Like the women wear long dresses that cover and the men usually dress up, and it's them, it gives them pride as well. So I see what you're saying in that the uniform too, and the way that you dress can make you feel more important and help you identify too with the community or family. So I think the idea of a dress code could be definitely beneficial, but the idea of uniforms, like everybody wearing the same exact thing, if that makes sense. Yeah.
Thank you, Megan. Nobody has their hand up yet, so we'll just continue going back and forth. So you were saying that how can you have a strong foundation of personal belief in yourself if you have to wear a school uniform? But I would say that if your foundational belief in yourself is rooted in your clothes, then it's not deep enough. And that there is a problem if people identify too much with what they wear. It is a factor in your sense of self. Yes, it is a factor. But I think if it's your foundational factor, that's unhealthy and going too far. Also, children do not wear school uniforms all the time in all of life. It's just when they are in school. So just when they are in school, it shows that they're here to focus, they're here to learn, like it's a way of removing some distractions of clothing. Like, for example, you said that some styles of clothing, especially for women, are provocative. Yeah, I agree with that. And that's also why like dress codes have rules against types of clothing that are provocative to a certain degree. And then I would also say uniforms do not say, I don't think uniforms do say that one's life is insignificant or unimportant for reasons I said earlier, that some people feel good about it. So yes, there are differences of opinion, and maybe the good thing to do would be to look at research and look at studies, take polls of opinions, so that each school can decide for themselves whether they want to have a uniform policy. Granted, students come into school they graduate. There's always a cycle of new people, and opinions might change over time. But there is flexibility in this, and I'm just presenting this idea to say I think that the evidence points to benefits being with the school uniforms if we're looking at the outcome. And then also finally, you mentioned centralized authority with schools, both public and private. I would argue that private schools do not have as much of a centralized authority as public schools, because public schools, the central authority is the government, the Department of Education, and things like that. With private schools, it's just the private school. So there's a much more immediate connection with the authority there. Big difference. Oh, and then one more thing, I also wanted to add that yes, it is true that public schools have uniforms in the UK and Ireland. I didn't know about Malta, but Kathleen added that they're in Malta. Actually, but my original point was that school uniforms are more common in private schools than in public schools. So yeah, they can be in both. It's just that they're more common in private schools. And actually, I didn't include this in the idea written, but in my research, I found that public schools are more and more public schools are adding a uniform policy in hopes of improving or rather decreasing like crime or trouble, for lack of better words. So anyway, I yield the floor, and Kat has her hand up, so please, Kat.
Okay, well, one thing I think is good about having uniforms is you can't tell which students are rich or poor, you know, because everybody sort of blends in and wears the same thing. I mean, they can maybe put a pin or something on their blazer, but I don't know. I think there's some restrictions to that when you're going to school. I went to a private school, Catholic school for a while, run by nuns, actually. Lots of nuns. There were regular teachers, but a lot of nuns. But I think it's good to have uniforms in school because of that. Because maybe it allows for like less trouble, more unity. And I think as the human species needs more unity in the sense of like unity of people from different backgrounds, different colors, you know, different places where they come from, you know, different ancestry. We need unity. And I think the uniform sort of represents that unity. I don't think it's so much a control mechanism as it could be something used to unify. And that's it.
Thank you, Kat. Actually, it occurs to me some people may enforce the school uniform policy because they want to control, and others might enforce the school uniform policy because they want to unify. People can have different motivations for this thing. So anyway, Megan, your hand is up. Please go ahead.
Yes. So, okay, a couple of things to touch on. The school uniform is just, once again, it's all about socialism, which is the direction where the entire country on a general basis is headed. And it seems good, right? It seems, you look at it, you look at the Finnish education system, but on a lower level, it's not. I mean, look at the quality of life in general. So the fertility rate of an average, and I'm going to use Finland for an example, but it's very similar in America. The fertility rate of a woman in 1820 was almost 5 children. She had five babies. Well, in 1920, it went down to about 2 something. And as of 2020, it's like 1. So what that goes to show me is that the quality of life is going down as we promote. Notice how when we promote socialism and things like this, you start to have women now enter the workforce, they have less children. And this is an issue because the family is breaking. And the family is the only way, that's the backbone of it. Having a strong family is the only way that individualism can really be restored in true communities. So, something that Kathleen had mentioned was the uniform helps to kind of hide who's rich and who's poor. And I so see that how that could happen in schools, and how it's, yeah, it would be unfortunate. But I think we can completely do away with the problem by doing away with schools, because they're not only are they unnatural, but they also, I mean, they're government indoctrination camps, government institutions that where the state raises the children. And even if it is at a private school, which might be a little bit better, not much because they're both indoctrination, but a little bit, the children are still raised by an outside authority that's not their parents. So in any way, how could that ever be good or beneficial to, for individuals and families? And then I don't think we need unity. I think we need individualism. I think unity is going to divide people further, because part of what it means to be human is to be unique, to be an individual, to express yourself. And the second we're grouped and locked in cages and all dressed the same, that's when our individualism starts to go away. Even if you don't identify everything with how you dress on the outside, because like Lois said, that's not everything. It's about what it tells your mind subconsciously. It's very similar to Brave New World. If you've seen the movie or read the book, that's what I think of when I think of the different classes all dressed the same. It's like you don't even see people as an individual. You just see the entire social class that's more docile, that's easier to control. And that's all I think that the studies prove that show that school uniforms perform school performance. The better you do in school, the more indoctrinated you are, which isn't really a good thing. I mean, I guess if somebody wants to be indoctrinated and rely on the government, then okay, that's fine. But if somebody wants to pursue more individuality, then it's not necessarily a good thing. And I think that something else I agree with that Lois brought up is the desire for schools to choose. So if we actually had more individualism rather than unity, as in small independent communities that self-governed, and if they wanted to set up some kind of community school that the kids went to maybe a couple hours a week, maybe if you want to educate your kid outside the family, then in that case, sure, if the school decides something, but it's on a small individual level. The point is not for it to be mandated on a centralized level. And I believe that when we have individualism, unity is kind of a natural thing, or respect for others. Because we can look at pre-colonial America, like the town of Dedham, Massachusetts. It was a very, very independent town, and they had people from all over come, from all different, who spoke different languages, different races, and they got along fine because they were all complete individuals. So there was no centralized authority, and I think we need more of that. And I think, yeah, I'll stop there.
Thank you very much, Megan. Kat, your turn.
Okay, I still disagree with the control thing. I mean, I think the best thing about school uniforms is that you can still be individual in school uniforms. I went to school with people who were very individualistic, had their own personalities, even in their uniforms. It doesn't make a difference. And like a lot of things have changed since when I was a child. I was a child during the 70s. And all of a sudden, between the 70s and 80s, I'm part of the X generation. So that's the latchkey children generation, where we often had to, like, both our parents worked and we had to use a key to get into the house. But during the 70s, all the mothers could stay at home and take care of the children. So I think between the 70s and 80s, the cost of living must have gone up quite a bit. I think houses became more expensive, maybe food and everything else became more expensive between the 70s and 80s. So all of a sudden, the women in the household had to go to work in order to be able to afford the houses or the cost of living. And I think it's even worse today. And it's kind of scary. I think there should be uh, more support for women and for children, you know, in to be able to afford a house to live in or a place to live in. And the nice thing about Sweden, if I use a comparison, is in Sweden, a woman gets to stay home with the children for up to 2 years with 80% of her salary from her former job. So that's really, really good. But they don't have uniforms in their schools. But I think it's a positive thing because one thing I remember from school once is when I went back to public school, there was these girls and they were like sort of bragging about how rich they were. And the other kids were just like, you know, sort of bragging about the kind of clothes they were wearing. And they were designer clothes and everything like that. So I don't think that's such a positive thing. It makes other kids feel like they have to compete, you know, to be in style, to be the more popular one in school. So that's it.
Thank you so much, Kat, for sharing your experiences and perspectives. Kay is next. Kay, take it away.
Yes, thank you. So with with Kat's response for just things getting more expensive, so true. Like when she said that, I was trying to think of any of my friends or family that has one person staying at home and the other going to work. And it's pretty common, at least in my area, that these households are two income households. It's crazy. Like I'll look at a house, and maybe this is something completely different, but a house in California, maybe everyone on the line's aware that it could be a 3-bedroom, 1.5-bath home, and the yard could be like a complete train wreck and backyard almost non-existent, and it's sitting on the lot at $1 million. And it's just crazy. And then I'll look over like in Kansas and go, oh, what a beautiful home. But if it was in California, forget it. You better get like a fleet of people to be bringing in money to pay for it. But for the uniforms and the dress code, I'll have to go. I'm seeing all the different points of view, but I'm definitely being pulled on my own personal experience, where I went to a school where we had uniforms and dress codes together. So we had the basic uniform, which was the white polo shirt and navy blue bottoms, whether it was a skirt, pants, or a jumper. And if you didn't want to do that, then if you were a girl, you could wear any type of pattern as long as it didn't show like firearms or any type of violence. But it couldn't be spaghetti straps, and your skirt or dress, those are your only choices. If you wanted to wear pants, you had to wear the uniform navy blue pants, but your skirts, I think that's what they call them, the skirt shorts, your dress or your skirt could only be about 2 inches above your knee. So we had those guidelines. And on Wednesdays, we would have free dress where the girls could wear pants, but of course they had to be a certain way. They couldn't be the shredded jeans. But I felt during those rules, I still felt you could still see the individuality. There are certain, you could still see the person or I felt that they didn't have us so much confined by just how we could dress. We were still able to freely express ourselves. At least that's definitely the feeling I had. And the pluses, as mentioned before by some of the other individuals, where you wouldn't have to worry so much of, oh, what are you going to wear today? It's like, these are your options. And if you can't think of anything from this, then you're going to wear a uniform. Even get away with wearing probably the same exact uniform, sometimes a couple days in a row if you don't spill anything on it, and a very crazy day on the playground. But I do see the pluses of a uniform, and I didn't feel too constricted, not being able to express or feel too boxed in or confined. So um, those are kind of like the thoughts that came in my head. So I yield the floor. Thanks.
Interesting. Thank you also for sharing your experiences, Kay. All right, Megan, you're next.
I love where the topic led because this is kind of how it all connects to me. And it has to do with feminism and why prices are so high. I mean, there's so many reasons for it, but I want to start by saying one thing, and I've talked about it before, and it sounds shocking at first, but I really believe it, is that men and women are not equal whatsoever. And that is the issue of these uniforms in schools, is that you have young boys and young girls together treated like they're the same. And that's not true at all, because it all goes back to roles in nature. Men hunted, men provided, in that case it'd be financially, right, because it's the security. So back, if you live in the hunter-gatherer times, then your financial security is the food, that the hunt that your man's going to come, and then of course in exchange for that the woman raises the children. But in our modern world should be, I believe, or I guess I see best fit in the purpose of man and woman, that the man provides financially enough so that way his woman can stay home and raise the kids. Like, imagine as a woman how amazing that would be, to not have to go work an outside job for somebody else, but to be at home, to be a homemaker, and be a housewife, raise your kids, help take care of your husband. But also you have so much time to do as you please. So if your passion is playing the piano or writing, or if it's painting or public speaking, whatever that is, you have so much time to do that with your husband supporting you. So something I want to read, this was directly about the Finnish education system. And so they're a socialist country pretty much. And I believe that this is where America's gonna head to, maybe. But just listen to this. So it says, a gradually expanding welfare system could manage an ever greater portion of the family's traditional tasks, and it made couples less dependent on the institution of marriage. So in Finland, marriage rates have gone down, divorce has gone up, people are having less kids, fertility rate is going down. So government provisions for parental leave, child allowances, child care programs, and much improved health and pension plans meant that the family was no longer essential for the care of children and aged relatives. So that's what's happening. That's what we're seeing. Prices are going up for a lot of things. Hyperinflation. We're not there yet, but we're at inflation, and well, the dollar inflates every year. But it's all is to make people more dependent. So that way, we no longer rely on our families for security, but we rely on the government, who can then tell us to do anything in exchange for us getting basic needs like money or food. So I think, like Kathleen said, things are so expensive. And Kay, the best thing I feel like a woman could do is have a strong alpha male go make a ton of money for them both. He can go hustle and work. That's in his nature. Go hustle, go work, make millions of dollars. That way he can buy the home. And that's how can we ever produce strong men in schools when their masculinity is shattered? So yeah, basically tying it all in together, the whole idea of uniforms teaches that men and women are equal, and we can see the problem in society because it's not about who's more important. Both are extremely important, extremely honorable and valuable, because there is no baby without man and woman. But the point is they're distinct. I believe it works best when men are providers and women are nurturers and supporters. And like Kathleen said, yes, alpha males and alpha females exist. It's king and queen. They rule together. And the men in society should help shape the women. And I think that it's a beautiful thing that they rule in dominion together. So we need king conscious men and queen conscious women. It goes both ways. I yield.
Thank you, Megan. So I want to touch on briefly on some things you said about men and women. I don't want to get too deep into it right now because that's not the main topic, but this idea that having school uniforms teaches that boys and girls are the same. I think if anything, it's the opposite, because usually the boys wear trousers and the girls wear skirts. So if anything, I think it would say that the boys and the girls are different. However, I thought about whether including this in my idea or not, but I think that boys and girls should have freedom to choose whether they want to wear the like more masculine, traditional masculine trouser or the skirt style according to what they feel more comfortable in. And then also, so I wanted to circle back to some things that you said earlier as well. That school uniforms is all about socialism. School uniforms, if I remember correctly, they date back to the 16th or the 17th century. So I disagree that they are all about socialism. I think that they are separate. They might be linked, like you can draw similarities, but I don't think practically speaking, there's a very strong link there. And then also this idea that we need individualism, and when we have individualism, unity becomes natural. I would like to see evidence to support that, because when I see more and more individualism, like when it gets too extreme, I don't see unity. You did mention that town, I think, earlier. But on larger scale, I'm wondering whether that's true. And it is true that you can have too much unity or like too much conformity rather, or too much individualism, because actually sometimes when we embrace our individuality, that enables us to come together better because our differences are complement each other. So there's naturally more unity that way. Maybe that's what you were getting at. And then also, you're saying that we should just do away with schools. For the purposes of this debate, I would like us to assume that the question that we are debating either schools with uniforms or schools without uniforms, because whether schools exist or not is a separate issue. Anyway, I think that's all I wanted to say for now. Let's see. I think Kat is next. Okay, please go ahead, Kat.
Well, I found that the first recorded use of school uniforms was in England back in 1222. At other schools, they wore robes sometimes. So I guess it differed slightly. I don't believe in this whole thing of like alpha male, because I was brought up to be an alpha female. So I don't think you can totally depend on men anymore, not in this day and age, at least. So it's good to learn how to do things yourself. If you're a female, like fix your car, fix things around the house. I've done that quite a bit myself. You can't always depend on a man to do everything, because they're probably not going to do it, or they don't know how to do it, or things like that. So I don't believe in the conservative sort of let the alpha male do everything. So I don't think, at the private school I went to, it was very conservative, very Catholic, but they allowed us to wear pants as well as skirts. I'm done.
All right, thank you, Kat. Megan, your response, please.
So yeah, in response to Kat, there's not a lot of when I talk about man, I don't just mean any man, because there are a lot of just incomplete men out there. Due to feminism, we have masculine women and feminine men, and it's very hard to pair. But there are some really amazing men out there, and they're looking for really amazing women too. So when we become amazing women, we will attract that. So now, I see what you're saying in that we live in such different times now. So it is difficult for most people, but it all starts with who you are and what you believe that you are worthy of and what you are deserving of. That's what I believe we attract into our life. And um I think that yes, and having an alpha male is important, but once again, being a strong woman is also important because there's so many amazing things that us women do that men need too. So it goes both ways. That like we birth their children, like that's amazing, that's beautiful. Men can't do that, but we carry a child in our womb for 9 months. I mean, I mean, think how appreciated that our men are if we keep the house clean and organized and have food for them. And but also women, we're super intelligent. I believe women may be more intelligent than men in some senses. So we can also give them guidance. We can have the ideas and say, hey, like, hey honey, I just saw this amazing idea to make a ton of money, go do it. And so then it's almost like I feel like literally Lois is laughing, but that's where our feminine power is. Like I'm serious. Men, complete men who really respect and value the woman will do anything for the woman that they love. And that's really when our power comes in, embracing our true feminine power, because we can do all things men can do. I totally believe that. But why would we want to if we don't have to? Okay. On the topic of, so Lois asked for examples of individuals who have formed together in unity. I think I need to use better words to describe it, but the Amish, the Mennonites, the city of Dedham, Massachusetts. So what I mean by being an individual, it's not it's only you and you don't never pair with anybody else and you're isolated. That's not what I mean. I mean having a strong foundation of self, as in you know who you are, you've mastered yourself, and you know your purpose. You know yourself enough so you know who else you can relate to, and that's when you form other relationships like a marriage and a family, and then at that point you can then join in unison with other people who also live and have the same values as yourself. So that having that on an individual basis is important, because only then when you know yourself do you know who you relate to. So this idea, of course, of individuality, it's never going to work on a mass scale because humans can't be standardized like that. We've tried, history has tried, it doesn't work, it never will. So the whole idea of this state bureaucracy system, it's never going to work. That's why I suggest small independent communities who can rule however they want to, how they please. And I think the idea that uniforms showed up back in England in 1222 just shows that uniforms have always been a way to control people. So it's not, now socialism is an aspect of the modern society. It's not school uniforms and socialism. I'm not saying they're the same thing. I think that they are related, definitely. But socialism too is kind of it's just a modern word to describe something that's been happening since the beginning of time. The push to make everybody equal, the same, kind of like a one world unitarian government to where people are easy to control. So I think that, yeah, of course, the William T. Harris, who was the U.S. Commissioner of Education and studied all the history of education of the world, from his readings, he found that education, scientifically defined, is a subsumption of the individual. And of course, he was talking about schooling. So that's what all these schools have done since, yeah, probably even before 1200. Years back, schools were created too for the sole reason to control people. Because education is something that happens at a personal, intimate level. Now, schooling is the organizing of education. So schooling is not always bad or negative. That's not what I'm saying. I think that if we can properly organize education, then it can be beneficial on a very small family level, individual self-education level, or some kind of small community level. But overall, schools are designed to impose ideas and train people how to live. So I think the bigger question we need to ask is, how do we want to train our children to live, and what kind of world are we training them, and what are the things that we're doing, such as uniforms, teaching them about life and roles on a subconscious level. I yield.
Thank you, Megan. So schools impose, oh yeah, my hand is up, by the way. Schools impose ideas and train people how to live. I think training people how to live is a good thing. I mean, life is hard, and I want to know how it works so that I can make the best of it and do the most good that I can. Like, it's a good thing, I think. Anyway, I guess, anyway, I think that sort of speaks for itself. Also, not all schools impose ideas. There are schools with healthy values of education that want students to explore and think critically and search for themselves, and the teacher or instructor is there to present information, spark discussion, provide a context for things that students are learning maybe on their own time. When I was in graduate school, one of my professors called herself a learning facilitator, I think, if I remember. She was a facilitator. That's how she identified herself. What if every teacher identified themselves as facilitators of learning? I think it's possible for schools to have the kinds of things that you're looking for, Megan. True, bigger and bigger classes means less and less intimate. However, there, of course, should be a limit to how big classes are, ideally. And I think learning can also be an intimate experience. I remember, so both in my undergrad, I was homeschooled. For those who don't know, I mentioned that a few weeks ago, but for people who might be watching. So I was homeschooled, and then I went to undergrad and graduate universities. And I had pretty small classes, comparatively speaking, for higher education. Like, I don't remember being part of a class that was more than 25 people. And it was usually much smaller than that. But to me, it did feel like an intimate experience. The professor always made it known that they were available to discuss things. You could form a relationship with your instructor. It felt personal, and like, it didn't feel impersonal to me. So I think the personal kind of education that values students' free will and their own mind is possible. I don't think it's such a dichotomy. And then oh, so I see in the chat, the question is, why are we letting the state and outside authority teach our children how to live? Oh, well, I mean, that's state education versus private education versus tutoring, homeschooling. There are state schools that can use uniforms, and there are private schools that can use uniforms. So I think that's a separate issue. I actually prefer private education as opposed to state education, just to be clear. But anyway, the last thing that I wanted to bring up was this forming a strong foundation of self. And Megan said that that doesn't happen if you have school uniforms. So going back to my own experience in high school, like I said, I was homeschooled. However, sometimes I attended co-ops, and that's the kind of thing where a group of homeschooling parents and educators get together and volunteer to teach things to children of other families. And I remember that I didn't really have a foundation of myself at all. And so I didn't, and part of that was that I didn't have a sense of style that I wanted to express because I didn't really know myself. I didn't have a sense of style. I didn't take care of myself. I didn't know who I was. So I just wore whatever was available to me, and I didn't really care, and I didn't feel good about myself. And I think that I think that probably some other people might be able to resonate if they were similar when they were of school age. But I think having a uniform would help people feel like they are included and part of something, especially those who struggle with self-worth and struggle with feeling included. And I did bring up those things as part of my idea. As part of the written in Agora, I mentioned inclusion. But I think that uniforms can actually contribute to a sense of self-worth. I yield the floor. Oh, Kat, you put a comment in. Would you like to speak to that?
I just don't agree that wearing a uniform makes you a dull person. Because, I mean, I came out with, I think I was like a Mensa student. I was really intelligent, got straight A's, and came out creative. I do things like sewing and making jewelry as hobbies. And making hats and other things. I am Gothic. I came out as a lifelong goth, really, which is another creative thing. So I don't think it's true. I think when you wear a uniform, it's more a traditional thing to me. It's more like an age-old thing that's probably gone back to England, our English ancestors, really. And maybe the whole church thing too. Maybe it came from the church in the Middle Ages, really. You know, with the robes and then the uniforms. Yeah. So I don't think, I don't agree that it stops people from being individuals.
Thank you, Kat. I really like hearing people's personal experiences. And I know personal experiences don't speak for the whole. And, you know, to get a better picture, we need to aggregate experiences and see if we can find trends. But I really value learning more about each of you and your experiences and your past. So, Megan, your hand is up. Please go ahead.
Yeah, I agree, Lois. And I appreciate the personal experience too, Kat, because I think personal experiences I value them over any kind of scientific study, really. I think personal experiences on an individual basis are more meaningful. And it's not that I'm saying that school uniforms are that promote dull people or anything. That's not it, because there's a lot of really amazing creative people I've met too, and who, you know, we've all been through school. I remember I had a school uniform in elementary school. It's not that. It's just the premises of I don't want any other man outside of my husband or my father to tell me how to live, and I don't want that to happen to my kids either. The idea of the state telling my children or even myself that this is how you have to wear, this is how you have to act, because I don't submit to the order of the state, but I submit to my husband. And it's different. It's a different dichotomy. Submission is a natural thing, a natural response to trust, and who can really trust at least the American government. So yeah, it's just the premises of an outside authority dictating how we live, how we dress, how we present ourselves. I just can never get behind that unless I agreed with the mission of the centralized authority, but that's never going to work because once again, we're all so unique and so different. We're not all going to agree to the same thing, which is why it goes back to the individual household presence, the household. the authority. And to comment on what Lois said about uniforms making people feel included, why do we have to make people feel included? Why don't they naturally feel included? And the reason is because school is a network society, just like most of the modern world. So how many of us remember all the teachers we had or all the students in our classroom? Maybe we remember, faces here and there, but for the most part, we don't remember them. We don't really talk with them. We don't even remember much of what we learned in school. But how many of us would ever forget our uncle or our grandma or our childhood best friend? It's the difference between a community and a network. So schools are insignificant. They are a network society. They don't care about the entirety of the individual. They just care about a small little sliver. And that makes people feel lonely and makes people feel isolated, among many other things. We have people out of their roles, and we have just an artificial society. And also poor nutrition too, poor living habits. People feel empty on the inside. They feel meaningless. And that true fulfillment comes from community. And you can't really build community in a network society. You can have networks within an existing community, sure, but without community, I don't believe people will ever have fulfillment. And yes, I yield.
Thank you, Megan. So you're not comfortable with anyone telling you what to do or how to live outside of your father or your husband. So this is a rather a pointed question, but if you were employed somewhere and the employer said you had certain rules, like you can't wear this kind of big jewelry, or you have to you can't say these kinds of things while you're at work, or you need to smile when you interact with people. Like, are you uncomfortable with those kinds of things? Because in the beginning of the idea that I wrote, I drew a parallel with uniforms on sports teams and employment, and how wearing uniforms in sports teams and employment doesn't, like, I think it went unsaid that it doesn't really affect people's sense of self or their individuality, but they wear the uniform because they're there and they're part of a team and making a statement. So I'm asking, like, what makes this different? And could you offer some clarity on the idea that you expressed, please, Megan? Thank you.
Sure. So what I mean by that is, well, I wouldn't be in the situation where I'd be working for another man outside of the home. So the reason why I would respect the decision of my father, my brother too, and my husband, is because, I know that I am smart and I'm intelligent and can make my own decisions, of course, but I act on emotional. I get emotional. And so I found that men who really love and care about me can see that, and they can help me see rationality. They can help me see things that in long term that I don't see because I want to act on impulse so much. So I really, really value that. And the reason why I talk about my husband, my brother, and my father is because those are three men that love me unconditionally, and they would never steer me in the wrong direction. So I know that when I have something that and now of course, there's many decisions, of course, I make on my own, but what if it's something big that would affect the family or something, that I can come to them, present this to them and say, hey, what's your feedback? How do you feel about this? And take that into consideration, because especially in a marriage, a husband and wife, it's a united front. We stand together. So it's really important that we are on the same page. And I know that my husband leads the family. And so that's really important for me. So I want to trust his decision. And because I know that when his leadership is for my protection and my children's protection and just the betterment of us in general. So that's what I mean. Whereas it's not that I never listen to anybody else. I mean, if I'm in a group like this, of course, I'm going to be respectful to the rules and how everything's executed. But it's basically when it comes to how to live or somebody else telling me how to be that doesn't actually really, care about my well-being and stuff. It's just once again, it goes back to the difference between a network and a community. Does that make sense?
Yes, thank you. I think I understand what you're saying. I think I understand. But this raises a question. You're saying that you wouldn't need to work outside the home, but so does this mean that you are okay with boys' schools having uniforms because there's an expectation for boys to grow into men who work outside the home and maybe need to wear certain things?
Um, well, it depends. So the idea of putting boys in a classroom isn't helping them develop their masculinity. They should be out in the real world. They should be out in the real world making money at a very young age. So that way, when they are 18, instead of going off to college, they actually have an estate. They have money saved up. They're wealthy young men. So that's what I want to develop. So whatever that's going to take for them. So they're going to learn a lot from their father. So that's going to be very helpful. But I want to encourage them to do apprenticeships too, whatever they're interested in. So if they're interested in landscaping, then yeah, I'll say, hey, let's set up an apprenticeship or let's go work a summer job. You're going to work a summer job for a landscaping company. And if the landscaping company has a uniforms, of course they'll wear that. But if your question is, do I think that we should have just schools for boys? No, I want to be able to organize that. Like you said, the idea of teaching people how to live is not a negative thing. It's just a matter of who's teaching it because that determines where they're led. So I would love to organize the kind of education curriculum for my children. Or if I feel like somebody else could do certain parts better, then I could outsource it at that part. But yeah, once again, the idea of only schools for boys, no, their education should be real world experience, hands-on activity.
All right, thank you. So so what you're saying is that boys and girls should learn together and they should not wear uniforms because it's more important for because preparing boys to be in a mindset to work where there might need to be a uniform is not as important as having the individuality and freedom to dress as you choose. Is that correct?
Wait, can you repeat that? Just so I
No, I don't think I can. Okay, so I think what I was getting at is that the reason. So okay, all right. So whoever later in life is expected to work somewhere where they have to wear a uniform, there can be value in them wearing a uniform in school to prepare them for that kind of thing and to not have a double standard, and that it's okay in work, but it's not okay in education, but just to equalize it.
Okay, I see what you're saying. See, no, because that's the point is that school is training for the workforce society. And I don't really want my children to be a part of that. I want them to be self-sufficient and have their own sources of income. So that's the point of them. They can work jobs when they're younger, but they're going to save that money and invest it. That way their money is working for them. So they won't have to be reliant on any kind of institution. So maybe temporarily if they had to work somewhere and wear a uniform, sure, but that's the whole concept. Is I don't want them in schools because I don't want them to be trained to enter the 9-to-5 corporate world that creates indentured servants and stuff. I want them to be free and have free will, and really the point I want them to do is find what they are passionate about on the inside, what they care about, what their purpose is. Go out there, make it happen, start building that, find a woman, or if that also shares that same vision, who's going to help him take that to the next level. And that'd be the goal for them.
All right, thank you, Megan. So I just want to be clear that in my opinion, women and men should be prepared to work because there is no guarantee that you will get married, that anyone might get married. And you need to be able to, it is better to be able to have a means for yourself instead of just believing that you'll find someone who will provide for you. I think it's wiser to prepare for that kind of thing. But the other thing I wanted to say is, okay, an observation that it seems like, Megan, you do not like the idea of school uniforms because you distrust the whole school system in general. So, and that like parents and family can provide a better education because they know you and they care about you. So my question is there any way that a school, how about that a private school, is there any way that a private school could earn your trust for educating yourself or your children or your neighbor's children?
If I knew the teachers personally, if my children had the same teacher all their entire life, and if my family was specifically funding the board and determining what they're going to be learning and actively involved. So if a teacher said, hey, this is the curriculum, we want you to do this with your kid, this, that, we want you to take them here, go take the police officer off to lunch, interview them and write a report on it. We want you to take your kid to a farm and go experience it. If somebody else organized it, then at that case, yeah. But the point is, I don't want them to be taught or raised up by somebody outside of me and my husband. I want that to be the core foundation. But I would love to be involved in co-ops too, or I want them to gain a wide variety of experiences. And one thing I'm going to do too, actually, is both for my sons and daughters, when they're older, I'm going to encourage them to go live by themselves for a year. The daughters too, to go work for a year and provide for themselves and really ask if that's the life that they want to live long term. So I want them to have a really wide array of experiences so that way they can choose for themselves. So I just don't see that happening in a school that doesn't know my family. And also, I have very unique values and lifestyle than a lot of people. So it would be difficult. The only school I could see, which is actually is part of my dream, is to build a community of other like-minded families. And yes, I would love to have some kind of school there, similar to the Amish in a way, but it would be it wouldn't take up that much time, maybe just a couple hours a week. And it would be very community focused. All the parents would be funding it and determining what the kids are learning, and everything. Most assignments would be maybe given in school and talked about, but would be executed at home with the family or on an individual basis.
Thank you, Megan. I think I could get behind that idea. Like just hearing like summary that you've explained, I think that sounds good. I think in general, it's better for education to be more localized.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Okay. Kay, you're next.
Thank you. I'm also trying to think of what was I going to say. We just have so much awesome information. But yes, that's right. So Lois, when you, I should have wrote it down, but it was, darn it, it's gone. But one other thing that I wanted to mention is I do see I'm kind of hearing everyone's point of views and going, okay, I see that. I grew up going to a Christian school. So Megan, when I hear you talk about just the roles that people will have in the family, the almost like the wives submitting to the husbands. I remember that somewhere in the Bible, and they would tell us a lot about that having that core at home is fantastic. And I couldn't help but keep my mind from wandering that sometimes that's not always what ends up happening. So even though that could be a wonderful situation, if that doesn't pan out to be the long term where there is a divorce or just things don't go as planned, that would there be a way for the training of, yes, taking care of the household, but also being able to take on that role that's given to the male who's bringing in the money, or if something happens to the wife, that the men also know how to take care of, just kind of pick up where that person was and they're no longer there anymore. I didn't know if that would be kind of incorporated into your idea. And I yield.
Yeah, that's great. If I may respond. So yeah, that's a great point. It's interesting because divorce was never really a thing before. It happened rarely. Even we can see in Amish societies, it is so rare that if an Amish family gets a divorce, it's like in their community in town newspaper. That's how rare it is. Because people really valued that community and love that they didn't give up easily. Because nowadays it's so easy to just divorce. It's actually pretty corrupt because now the woman can take half of the man's wealth, or vice versa. If the woman made the wealth, then the man could take half of it. And people are so incomplete now, and that I don't think I think they maybe marry for the idea of love or the idea of being married, but don't actually want to be married and make that long-term commitment. It also has to do with broken men and broken women. So that doesn't last. If two like incomplete people come together, it won't last. So there is a way around it though, and it all starts with rearing up kids from a young age, teaching women how to be proper women and teaching men how to be proper men. Now, every family might define that differently, and that's okay. But when we do that, then if you find you basically want to build a relationship from a stable ground, and to where basically it's almost like marry somebody that you both agree that divorce is never an option. Like it doesn't matter what happens, we're working through this together, because that's unconditional love. And some people say it's hard to find. I believe it's out there for everybody that wants it enough. And my brother said something too that was interesting. And he said that a lot of time love may not always be found right away, but it can be built. And it's, yeah, once again, if we think about times in nature, that wasn't a thing because they relied on each other. It's not just about, oh, women are dependent on men. Men are just as much dependent on women too, because like you said, if something happens to the woman, now the man has to raise the kids and work. It's very hard. If we can keep the roles distinct, I think we'll see a huge improvement, as we've seen in divorce is not a problem of traditional living. Divorce is a problem of the modern network society that has masculine women and feminine men. And one more thing I want to say with that too is also in traditional ways of living, if something did happen to the husband and then the woman would just return back to her father, who would take care of her or the other men in her family until she remarried, or if she did, women never had to worry about money or any of that. And now, once again, the issue is most of our fathers were not wealthy, and would so I do see it, and it is important for women to know how to do things. And if there was a situation where she had to take care of herself, sure, she should know how to do that. And it's not hard to learn, it's very easy, which would be the purpose of sending daughters to go live alone in the city for a year, so they can see that if I really have to do this, I can, and I'm going to be okay. But I know that this is not what fulfills me, and I want more. And so if you can get that, then you have it. Did I answer?
Yes, I do have a better understanding. And the more I think about it, the more I feel that, yes, so many things would have to change so that people would have to understand that this is how we're depending on each other. That's why I was kind of trying to make my brain think that way. Because right now, if everything were to fall apart, and just like you mentioned, a lot of our sometimes our fathers aren't wealthy. That if it's not me, then it's then almost you'd think it would it be then what do you call it, welfare, county help or things of that sort, just until you get back on your feet. That's kind of where my mind went. It didn't go to, oh, now I'm going to go live back home with my parents. But yes, I feel like if that was a foundation that everyone was built on, of just the having that type of support, that it could be. It would be a good thing, is having a supportive family in the community and not depending on the government if things don't go well with family or things of that sort. So yeah, thank you.
Yeah. Oh, one more thing I do have to say added on to that is, yeah, the world is so removed from that at this point on a general level. But what I've come to learn is that we don't have to identify with the world, because we can create our world. And I think that's the only way for me personally to manifest change, is to live that in my own life first, and then open up the doors for other people who want to live the same way to come. And that's it. All goes back to the small independent community, because trying to change this on a global level, it's just there's too much out there. It's the world is succeeding at what it was designed to do, and the world is just an idea. It doesn't really exist. So I think, yeah, small local level is where it starts. And I think from a small local level, we can actually manifest great change exponentially long term. It all goes back to one of my favorite Chinese proverbs, which is, if every man would just sweep the outside of his own home, then the entire world would be clean.
Thank you, Megan. I think those are inspiring words to lead us into closing comments, since I see no one else has expressing a hand up to speak. You did, we have brought up divorce, and I think that is a topic worth exploring in a future meeting. I know I have had an idea up here to write some things about re-examining our divorce laws in the United States. So I look forward to hopefully some future meeting down the line, but not for a few weeks at least, because we have exciting meetings lined up for the next couple of weeks. And I'll tell more about that later. But first, I'm going to open the floor for closing comments. So anyone want to go first with their closing comments? If not, I'll call on someone. Okay.
There we go. So yes, my closing comments, as always, a good discussion, and just something that came up that I realized that I also enjoy is when people started to tie in their personal experience. I enjoyed that part as well. And it seems like a lot of us here do too. So it's funny how we'll start with the school uniforms, and then we actually did go into marriage and family structure. So, but always a good topic. Looking forward to the next one. Thanks. Should I call on the next person, Lois? Should I volunteer someone?
Yeah, you can do that. You can do that, sure. But let me go last though.
Got it. Okay. Kat, please offer us your closing comments.
Okay, I think it was a really interesting topic. I mean, to me, it's just wearing a school uniform is more traditional than anything. It's not about like uh, control or like how much money you have or don't have. You know, it's just tradition. That's still around. And then that's my closing comment.
Megan is next.
I really appreciated this discussion, and thank you, Lois, for writing it, and Kat and Kay for contributing to. I think we had a really insightful discussion, and I really did love hearing all the points, because I do want to make it clear, I see where you guys are coming from, and I see the benefits in a uniform, as in, once again, taking away the stress of what to wear, not making people feel inadequate if they came from a poor family, because a young kid can't really do much about that. And also it takes away, the thought to, what am I going to wear today? It's already planned out. So I see it. And then of course I also see the cons too, as discussed. I just think overall a general idea of dress code could be more valuable on a community level rather than a set uniform. I yield.
Thank you very much, Megan. So I actually neglected to call for the closing vote on this idea to see whether anyone has changed their mind. So if you, well, I think I'll just ask, has anyone changed their mind after this discussion, changed their position from earlier? No? Okay. All right. So then after that, the question, people who dissent, I'm ask, what would it take for you to support this idea? So Megan, is there like anything that it might take for you to support the idea of school uniforms?
I don't think so, just because the whole idea of being, I mean, actually, maybe, I'll never say never. Maybe if it was something focused on more of a small scale community level, and that maybe that was more written in the idea and more on the fact that communities can, like, I can maybe say that if there was a vote and the parents who funded the school board had a vote and all the parents said, yeah, we think that that's just, sure. But on a national level, no. But if it was more community, maybe.
Oh, cats. Yes.
I just had a funny thing pop into my head. We've all seen that movie called The Sound of Music, right? And the funny thing is, she made the kids play uniforms, from like curtains. And I think they all look the same. They all look kind of funny. Even guys have like sort of roses on their play uniforms. But maybe instead of like strict uniforms, it could just be something you can like get dirty in, like maybe what the Amish kids wear. I don't know, but maybe the Amish kids, what the children wear is too fancy. But I think maybe children should just be allowed to wear play clothes. They can get dirty and be rough and stuff like that. Maybe that would be an answer to this.
Thank you, Kat. I think that like experiencing and playing is a big part of learning. And if that's part of learning, that should be part of schooling, right? Maybe. So yeah, I think that also sounds good. Cleanliness is also a value, but we also shouldn't be afraid to get dirty sometimes. Okay, so thank you everybody so much for your comments, your experiences, sharing your experiences, and for your presence today. So what I will do is I will review the notes from this discussion. I'm going to edit the idea that I have in Agora. I'm going to fix some typos. I'm going to add some things that I think were important, particularly from Kat, some things you said I'll add into the idea about how uniforms that are easily washable so that the value of play can be encouraged. And then also adding the point that uniforms erases wealth distinction, that you can't tell who's rich and poor. I think that is also a good benefit to school uniforms. And then also add the clarification that this is not a policy that I would like enforced on a national level, but more on a localized level. And so then maybe I might earn Megan's support. We'll have to see. I'll invite her to support the idea later. I will edit it, and then I will use the tool in Agora to invite you to examine the idea, and then you can decide whether you want to support it or not. So this discussion has been so valuable. Thank you very much. And for those of you watching, if you'd like to participate in another discussion, check out the description. We have lots of different events with Citizen Assembly, free and online. And also next week, our discussion will be on an idea presented by Stacy Gustafson on an autonomous community marketplace. So it will be another economic discussion, and I hope to see you there. Thank you again. Bye.